Here on BBC Two, in a new and unique series showing over the next 3 nights, the victims and perpetrators of violence and conflict are brought together in emotionally powerful and moving face-to-face encounters, overseen by Archbishop Desmond Tutu.
An extraordinary event is about to take place. In a quiet corner of Northern Ireland, the pain caused by terrible violence will be confronted. At Ballywalter House, victims and perpetrators prepare to meet. And coming to guide them, the world's greatest champion of truth and reconciliation.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Good morning.
Archbishop Tutu will chair face-to-face meetings between victims and men who inflicted violence.
I do not regret the fact that I was involved in the IRA. As a matter of fact, I'm very proud of it.
I joined because I wanted to kill Catholics. You're out to kill. You're out to kill as many British soldiers as possible.
The perpetrators will be questioned directly by the victims.
I have nothing to gain by this.
You said you had your hand on the gun.
Yes, I just tried the weapon.
So if your hand was on the trigger, who pulled it?
My husband went in to rescue people and they blew him up. Now, do you think that it's fair that people do that?
No.
You said yourself you were out to shoot a gunman. You were angry.
I was angry.
You're very angry. You were out for revenge.
Will you forgive me? Can you?
With Archbishop Tutu is Donna Hicks of Harvard University. She's widely experienced in conflict situations like the Middle East, Sri Lanka and Colombia. And Leslie Belinda. Her husband was murdered in the Rwandan genocide, and she went there to try to find his killers and learn the truth about his death. But the guiding presence is a man who knows how to lead people on a journey to honesty.
We expect, obviously, that all who come here are telling us the gospel truth.
Can there be any hope of healing, any thought of reconciliation, without an attempt to face the truth? That is the great challenge for so many people struggling in the aftermath of violence. So it is remarkable that victims and perpetrators have decided to face each other across a table and talk. This isn't a Truth and Reconciliation Commission like South Africa. There's no legal obligation on anybody to be here. They've come because they, as individuals, really wanted to. In this programme, a Southampton policeman who was shot by the IRA meets the man who pulled the trigger. But first, the story of Michael McLarnon, a Catholic shot dead by a soldier in North Belfast more than 30 years ago. The army was initially welcomed in 1969 by Catholic communities who felt they needed protection from sectarian attacks. But within a year they were seen by many as an army of occupation. There were riots and there were gun battles. In October 1971, Michael McLarnon was killed just yards from his home in Ardoyne by a soldier who claimed he'd shot an IRA gunman. But 4 years later, that soldier, Clifford, did something unusual. He wrote to Michael McLarnon's family. He revealed that at the time of the shooting, he'd had deep in his heart a lust for revenge. He asked for their forgiveness. A civil court later ruled that on the balance of probability, Michael was armed when he was shot. But his family has always rejected this, and they deny he was in the IRA. His sister Mary McLarnon has come to ask Clifford Burridge to clear her brother's name.
Good morning.
Good morning. I welcome you, Ms. Mary McLarnon, and you, Mr. and Mrs. Clifford Burridge.
Yes.
Thank you for coming here today, for this is a very courageous and very important step that you have taken to be sitting at the same table. We are very deeply humbled ourselves and impressed that you are willing to come. This is a forum, a safe space in which we hope we can facilitate your story being told. We pray that in a very small way, what we do together today will help so that the pain, the anguish, the woundedness, the trauma which you have held in yourselves over all these many years, that this will begin to heal, and that the process here will be one in which the wound is opened, it is cleansed, and a balm and an ointment poured over it, so that there will be a healing that will redound to the blessing of all of the people of this land. We will begin by just taking preliminary statement from each of you. Mary, do you think you would want to tell us a little bit about Michael? What kind of a person was he? What kind of a brother, what kind of a son to your parents was he?
Michael was a lovely lad. When he was younger, he always had this thing, I'm going to join the army. I'm going to join the army. And we used to say, Michael, you wouldn't be in the army, you're too quiet and too this. And he did try, he went and found out that it wasn't for him, came back and worked away and was very, very good to my mother. And he was a good brother. He was.
And Mary, coming to today, you've very bravely come here to this place. What are you hoping to get from coming here today?
Well, I am hoping, my brother Michael's dead. I can never bring him back. My parents are both now dead. And that was the one thing they always would have wanted, that Michael's name would have been cleared, because we weren't brought up that way. And that was the thing. She lost her son, we lost her brother, and his character was taken. And that was hard. That was very hard.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Cliff?
Yes.
Why have you come?
I've come, really, I didn't know Michael's mother and father were dead, but I've come really to share with Mary what happened, and I would like to see there to be some sort of, there's this word closure that seems to be used nowadays, but some helping, if I can provide information and compassion, and to see, to be able to see Mary come to get some answers, really, to the many questions she must have, and also she might be able to forgive me for what I did, And that would be the most wonderful thing there is, I think.
Thank you very much.
So Mary, do you want to tell us about the night that Michael was killed?
Right. The night that Michael was killed, Michael was out in the back shade, and every night, Mother always made the last tea, she called it the last tea, would have been 9 o'clock. And she had made the tea and shouted out, come on in now, tea's ready, that's it. So that night in particular, when she called him in, came in through the back and into the kitchen, and my mummy had said there had been shooting somewhere further down or further away, and what have you. And Michael says, oh, go out and see anybody about to see what's happening. And she says, don't bother, let them get on with it, don't bother. And Michael went out through the door, straight down the path, and Michael came back in, and he says, I've been hit with a rubber bullet. And she says, God forgive you, never ever say that. And he fell in front of her, and the blood poured out of his back like a fountain. There was a small hole in the front of him, and there was a gap that size in his back. Well, pandemonium set loose. My mother went into hysterics. She was tore apart. She was tore apart. My father was just in disbelief. How did this happen? Why? How did this happen? And what happened was, that night in particular, there was a house 3 doors down from where we lived, and the army kicked in the back door and they took over the house. Now the 2 occupants of the house was a young fella and girl. The occupants heard the soldiers saying, go up there, go up them stairs and shoot the first bee that moves. And there was 3 shots fired that night. The first shot hit Michael. The second shot hit a woman in the hand as she was coming from the shops. The other shot that was fired missed the fella because he saw Michael bent over and he came flying over. Where's the sniper? Nobody at the stage knew. Where was the bullets coming from? Where was the sniper's bullets? And it wasn't until the soldiers left the house and they came up. When they came up, they seen the neighbours cleaning the blood. And the soldiers came into the house to my mother. My mother was inconsolable. And you were the soldier that came into my mother.
Yes.
And you gave my mother 2 tablets.
Yes.
Now, how can I sit and tell you here what my mother was like? You seen what she was like?
Yeah.
She would have, it was as if her heart was tore out.
Yes.
But when the news come on, and they said that, yeah, I shot a Michael McLarnon in a drive, and he was an IRA organiser, you know, the shock of him being dead, and the shock, how are we going to cope with it? We have lost him and he's died, but his character's been taken, and a dead man can't defend himself. Well, the loss of their son, the loss of our brother, and then to label him an IRA organiser. We were not an IRA family.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a very wrong and misleading thing.
Tell us a little bit more about those years after Michael's death, what life was like for your father.
It was horrible. Horrible. Because my father had to go out to his work every day, and his job, he was sort of over some men, you know, and he always thought there was that stigma. And I look at him, his son IRA, it was in the paper, it's IRA. And my father's way of comfort was that when he took early retirement, he went out and he footed in the shade with the cars. And he used to wear the coat that Michael was shot in. We didn't want him to wear it, but on reflection now, I think it was like a comfort blanket to him that he wore it. And another way of coping with Michael's death was he paid £1,000 for a marble headstone. My brother's name, Michael McLarnon, is not on any IRA plaque. It's on nothing to do with IRA. The only place his name's on is on a white marble headstone in his own grave.
And you were having to live with that stigma, and he was having to go to work with that stigma, and there was some letters that you received,
Well,
some hate mail.
A lot of hate mail arrived in my mother's doorstep. And I would have opened the things for read the wee goodwill cards and things out there. And I opened this letter in particular. And I started to read it. And I realised when I was going to start to read it, it says on the letter, "This is just to let you know that I hope you burn in hell with your IRA son. And I couldn't build a bonfire big enough to put you on the top of it for bringing an IRA bee into the world." Now that was only one of them.
Mary, what do you think it will take to have Michael's name cleared? What would help you?
What would help me today if a soldier could say to me that he made a mistake, and in his heart of hearts to tell the truth, because truth comes with reconciliation.
Mm-hmm. You did receive a letter. I mean, you had all these many letters, the good wishes, and then the hate mail. And then a few years later, another letter came.
That's correct, yes. Another letter came from you.
Yeah.
You said in the letter that you wanted my mother to forgive you because you were a born-again Christian. Your wife was expecting your first baby and you hoped everything would go all right. That you cycled to work every morning and Michael's face came in front of you. And it was like an act of revenge because you were sick getting hit with bricks and bottles in Ardoyne. And my mother, when she read the letter, she says, "God, if he hadn't have caught my Michael an IRA man." But I will say this, tell you, her very words were, "Well, I hope his wee child was all right, but I wouldn't wish it any harm. And I hope he never has to suffer like I did."
Yeah.
That's what she did say.
It's wonderful.
I'm just mindful that in the letter, Clifford said things like, "Deep in my heart, I heard a lust for revenge," or he said that he had done so much wrong. I wonder if you could tell us how your family reacted to that, those kinds of statements.
Well, it kind of let us know that he knew that Michael wasn't a gunman or an IRA man. In his heart of hearts, like, deep in his heart, he knew Michael wasn't.
So did that go some way towards having Michael's name cleared?
No.
Knowing that
No,
No, not at all.
Then it was like a sort of an inquest. The soldiers came, the soldier A and soldier B, and more or less said that he was an IRA organiser.
How was that for you then, hearing this evidence given?
Well, that was like another kick in the teeth, this, because one minute there was a letter of forgiveness, and then the British Army thing again. I mean, you don't play. You don't play with people's minds, and you don't hurt people and then ask for forgiveness and then go back on your word again and think. You know, you say what you say.
Thank you very much. I believe that we have heard something very deeply moving. And in a very real way, it is sort of holy ground. And we hope that Clifford will be able to enhance this sense of God's presence with us. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Cliff?
Yes. I joined the army in 23rd of October 1967. I remember the date. And it's silly now, as a young man, also with dreams, and I'd read a lot of James Bond books. I mean, it seems so silly, but I wanted to be a bit of a James Bond. I wanted an exciting life, you see. And so I joined the army and was fortunate enough to get to Sandhurst and had a commission. And within 6 days, no less than that, within just a few 6 days of joining my regiment, we were in action in Belfast, but that was in 1970. So we were thrown straight into it, sort of thing, in rioting situation and stuff, and so that's where we were. So I'd done one tour of duty in Belfast, and then it came about that I went back to the Ardoyne on my second tour of duty.
So on a daily basis, out on patrol, what kinds of dangers were you facing?
Well, ambushes was the main thing. We patrol around the Ardoyne in sixes. In my case, I always worked with 5 other guys. And by the end of the 4 months in the Ardoyne, my platoon had fired about half the battalion's ammunition. We got about half the arms fines and half the arrests and half sort of gunmen killed. My one platoon. So the IRA soon knew on our patrol rota, which was my platoon. They used to wait for us and give us a good going over if they could.
So Cliff, could you maybe tell us about the weeks leading up to the day of the 28th of October 1971?
2 or maybe 3 days before that day, I was down near Brompton Gap, and there was a riot going on, and I got on the radio, which didn't work very well, and tried to get troops to come, surround them and make arrests. And it didn't work out. I mean, it just didn't work out at all. But what happened was somebody said, "Bottle, sir." And I looked up like that, and there was a milk bottle, high velocity milk bottle, coming smack like that. And I wasn't able to avoid it, but I was able to ride back with it. And I had, I think, maybe 6 stitches. But after that, I was so angry. I was so angry. And we just carried on as before. I think, you see, as an officer, you're supposed to be, you're supposed to bring normality in the most abnormal circumstances. The one person in the platoon or in the battalion or whatever it is the officer. He is the one that acts in a normal way and doesn't let sort of resentments and bitterness come up and things. But that's how I felt inside.
So Clifford, it sounds to me like you took that very personally when that bottle struck you.
Yes.
On your forehead.
Yes.
What was it?
It was just...
Why was it getting to you?
It was steely and it was clinical. And it was wrong. And...
Clifford, can you take us from that night when you felt something switched inside you, something changed? through to the 28th of October, 1971.
Well,
Tell
that
us
really
about
was, when we went out on patrol, that was the 28th of October, and that was my state that I went out in. I knew I was going to kill a gunman that night. And the place I can pick it up is that I think we went up, here's me, I'll have to do it this way, because I went up Etna Drive, and there was a gap between the houses. I don't know what you called that gap, but in Etna Drive there's a gap between the houses.
Yeah.
And a couple of bottles and bricks came over from there. And it was very dark, but it's funny that a guy came round the corner with a handgun. And he came round like that, and I jumped back. And I thought, when he comes round that corner again with that gun, I'm going to shoot him. And he came round with the gun, bang, and I fired. And I thought I got him. So I ran up, but he wasn't there. I ran through the gap, I was first, and I was met with the most tremendous hail of bottles and bricks, and they soon passed me like this. I mean, it was just unbelievable. So we went back up this alley, and I slung my rifle and jumped up and looked over the back door of a house, and looked in, and there was one, it didn't seem right. Went to the next one, and there was a young lady washing up at the sink. I said, this is the house. I said, we're going to drop quietly over into the backyard, and we're going to take over the house. There's gunmen. I said, I tell you now, there's gunmen out in Etna Drive, the other side. And so we slipped over the back, and when we'd all got over, we did it very quietly. She couldn't see us. She was bathed in the light of the kitchen, and we were in the dark backyard. I went in through the door, and she turned like this, and I just put my hand over her face like that and said, don't you make a sound. And I took my hand away, and she wasn't going to make any sound at all. She was so frightened. She couldn't utter even a peep. And we went from the kitchen into their front room, and I said to the husband, I said, don't you make a noise. I said, sit on that settee. And the wife went and sat. I said, you sit there as well. I said, not a sound. I went up the stairs with the guy with the starlight scope, a night scope on the rifle. We went upstairs. I opened the top window, and I looked out with the night scope like this. I sort of looked like this. I was only 30 metres away. In fact, it might not have even been 30 metres, very close. There was a guy standing there, and he appeared to be organising things. He had a pistol in his hand, and he was doing this and pointing and talking and like this, you see. And there was quite a few people around. And as this man walked to and fro, I followed him like this, and I went past the window frame here, and my barrel was in front of a glass window when I fired. So the bullet left my rifle, went through the glass window onto its target. And also, this was a first generation scope, big and heavy. They'd just been issued to us, and they sort of jury-rigged a system of holding onto the rifle, which wasn't held on securely. After a while, it would get a bit of a wobble, but I felt I was safe taking the shot because we were so close. So, bang. I fired, but I fired through the window, one round, at the centre of his chest. The gun recoiled. In the recoil, what I saw was a person run off to the right like that. I can remember this lady falling back. She had a coat on, and falling back, and sort of her I think she had a wraparound belt on, you know, like a tie belt. That, and the coat tails came up. No, her leg came up, and she fell back. And we went downstairs, I went out and there was the blood trail. And I just followed the blood trail to maybe 2 doors up. Would it have been 2 doors or 3 doors up from there? And the blood trail went into the house. And I went in the house and there was a man, which is I now know to be Michael's dad, there in the small room. It was a small room there. And this woman, who I know now to be the mother, was laid out on the settee, face down on the settee. I said, "Where's the gunman?" And the man said, "There isn't a gunman." I said, "Well, where's the injured man?" And he said, "He's been taken to hospital." And I said, "Who was he?" And he said, "My son." I said, "And what's happened to this woman?" And he said, she's fainted with a pain in her head. And so I went up to the man and I said, "Look, you give her these 2 tablets when she comes round and that'll take away a headache." And I walked back out. Radioed to say that he'd been taken to the Mater Hospital. And that was it. And I felt really, somehow, it's awful to say this, I'm sorry to say this, Mary, but when the news came through that we killed a gunman that night, all the platoon, "Hooray, we've got another one," sort of thing, you see. As soldiers do. I mean, that's just what soldiers are, really.
But how certain are you that the person you shot had a gun?
As far as I was concerned, I'd shot a gunman.
Yes.
There was no doubt about it. He was right there. But in court, and I brought this out, I said, the scope on the rifle was a little bit loose, and I'd swung through and fired through a window. And so the issue was, did I shoot the right man? There's a possibility that I could have shot, actually, I was aiming at the gunman, but there's a possibility I could have shot somebody next to him.
So you're raising some doubt now?
Oh yes, and I raised this in the court.
Mm-hmm. But this isn't the court today.
No, the upshot of it, but if I may say, the upshot of it was there, the judge was satisfied that I had shot a gunman. With all this, we discussed it all, he was satisfied I'd shot a gunman, and so he closed the case. But I think, and I took it, okay, I shot the gunman, but there is that definite shadow of doubt about it.
Clifford, you know, it was such an accurate shot. How do you explain the fact that it was such an accurate shot? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, I'm a good shot. I don't miss much. And the man was there, but, you see, as I've said, I'm a good shot as long as the sights are aligned correctly. But then also, I'd shot through the glass. It wasn't quite a right angle. It was about, it would have come in about like that at the glass and gone through the glass, and could have definitely moved the bullet over a few inches. And if Michael had, say, come up to the man and say, "What's going on here? You know, what's happening tonight?" Bang, it had been next to him. I think that's probably what happened, at a guess.
So the combination of the wobble on the scope and the possible deflection of the bullet through the window, it was just pure chance that it actually managed to hit him right on target, in a sense.
Yeah, well, I fired, the guy I shot at, I aimed right there, just at the centre of body mass sort of thing. And it only had to go like that, and it gets him centre of body mass. You know, That's my conclusion. And I did, as I say, I brought all this out in the court case, and the judge, he felt that he could close the case on that. He made his decision. But looking back now, he may well have been mistaken, the judge, in his summing up of the thing. And I think he was mistaken. Now,
do you think that perhaps because you had this determination, you had this anger and hatred, and that you were going to shoot, that you just might have shot an unarmed person because of that anger?
No, I honestly didn't. If I'd done that, I would have, years later, when I wrote that letter, if I'd done that, I would have had to have gone back and said, I've done that.
You have given across a sense of, particularly with the personal interaction with the family, a real sense of burden of guilt that you had lived with.
Yes.
And yet at the time you thought you were shooting a gunman. Why was that burden so great when you thought he was a gunman?
Let me just gather my thoughts a second. Yes, so just after shooting the gunman, a few days later I started to feel bad about it. And that went on for about a week or so. And I sort of got over it and just got on with the job. And it was a couple of weeks later where there was a big area search going on. And there was some houses up here on the drive. And I said, we'll do these next 4 houses. I knocked on the door, and a man inside said, put the kettle on, love, it's the soldiers. And I walked in, and this man was standing in front of me. And I said, I know you from somewhere. And he looked at me and he said, all he said was, yes, you're the man who killed my son. Oh. It was like a hammer blow. It was like a knife going in here, and the knife never left me. Everything I did, I got on with my life and things, and nobody knew, but there was that inside that I knew. I felt like I'd walked across a barrier. I crossed it, and I could never come back. I'd done something. You see, and I did shoot some other gunmen. But this one was just different somehow.
And now, having listened to Mary's description of her brother, of the kind of person he was,
I don't think he was that man that I shot at. Not from what you've told me.
Thank you very much.
I don't think he was the man that I shot at. I can't reconcile the man. He was out there for a long period of time. He was definitely organising things. Either expecting us to come through that gap in the houses or whatever. And he was definitely not the man that he was a man who was in sort of some authority.
Yes.
In charge of things. And he wasn't the man that you've described to me as your son. Your brother, sorry.
Do you not think, on reflection, maybe there was anger there and Michael was a consequence?
Well, it was a consequence in a way,
yes.
Wasn't it? Because there was something steely about me that night. I knew that I was going to shoot a gunman that night. And the consequence of it was that in the end, Michael died.
Yes.
I was doing my duty,
yes.
Actually.
But you were angry?
I was angry.
You were very
yes.
angry.
I was
You
angry.
would prefer revenge?
Yes, I was. Yes.
Yeah. That's just what I wanted to
But but what I have told the truth. There was the gunman there.
Yes.
And I'm willing to say I'm certain now that the man I shot at was a gunman, but that I hit Michael.
Yes.
And he was just there. Yes. But he wasn't the man he wasn't the man
you aimed at.
I aimed at. No, definitely not. No.
So he was shot by mistake.
Yes. Yes. I just want to say I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Well, I want to say I'm glad that you said you shot the wrong man, because you did. But you did it in the British uniform. Mm. But my mother suffered, my family suffered, and we lost our Michael.
I'm so sorry.
Well, all I can say is God forgives us all. We ask God to forgive us. I ask God to forgive us because He's a higher power than us. You have asked God to forgive you, so God has forgiven you.
Will you forgive me? Can you?
I haven't got the power to forgive anybody because I ask God to forgive me in my everyday life.
Yes.
So I don't really have a power to forgive anybody because I'm like you. I have to ask God to forgive me.
Yes. Yes.
And He's the all-powerful and the divine man that only can forgive us.
Right.
But I thank you for telling the truth.
I come here
yes.
with an idea of perhaps trying to help
yes.
you, in particular, because I mean it wasn't my brother.
No.
Would you be able now to go to your parents' graves?
Yes.
And say...
I don't even need to go to their grave. I can say my prayers and talk to them.
And you say to them...
I'll say I've done my best for Michael. And I've done my best to clear his name. That's all I can do.
And would you be able to tell us what you feel about Cliff now that he has...
I don't hate him. I don't hate anybody. But he's told the truth. And that's what matters. He told the truth.
Thank you.
Is there anything else that you might want to say?
Not really. Just that I'm so sorry, you know. So sorry that a mistake was made and that I made it. And it cost a man his life.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry for all the anguish it's caused your parents.
Oh, definitely.
And you.
Yes.
And I'm sure lots of other people over the years.
Yes.
You know, I can never appreciate that.
No.
But I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I think, that is probably as far as we can go. I want to say a big thank you to both of you for being willing to open yourselves to the possibility of being hurt again in the hope that perhaps you might begin the process of healing. We are helping to, as we recover the truth, and it is a process, and perhaps the truth comes not in a flash of enlightenment, but may come in stages.
Yes.
And we hope, obviously, that is also something that is going to be happening for yourselves, but especially for the situation in this land. We think it can happen if there are people like yourselves who are keen to help to expose the truth. And so God enlists your participation in in the process of trying to make Northern Ireland a place where people can actually live together. Thank you.
In the early 1970s, the IRA brought its bombing campaign to England. Next, Southampton police officer Malcolm Craig meets Ronnie McCartney, who tried to kill him after he discovered his IRA hideout. It's 30 years since they've seen each other. The story began at a flat in Southampton, where two armed men had been confronted by police. Though unarmed, PC Craig gave chase. As he caught up with the gunmen, he was shot at close range. Ronnie McCartney, the man who pulled the trigger, was a member of an IRA cell operating in the south of England. They were storing weapons and explosives. Malcolm Craig is here with his daughter Rachel to meet the man who nearly killed him.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
We welcome you, Mr. Malcolm Craig and Miss Rachel Craig and Mr. Ronald McCartney. Thank you for coming today. It is a courageous and a very important step that you have taken for you to be sitting at the same table. Perhaps I should ask you, Malcolm, to start. What are you hoping will happen here today?
I'm hoping that in some small way this will contribute to ending the fighting that is still going on here. To bring an end to this madness. And hopefully save other people getting hurt.
Yes. Thank you so very much.
Okay.
Ronnie?
I joined the IRA when I was 16 years of age. I didn't join the IRA to go out and kill people. I joined the IRA to defend my area. But fortunately or unfortunately, what happened, the conflict developed and we moved from defensive onto the offensive. As a result of my involvement in the IRA, I spent 21 years in jail for shooting this person here. But the fact of the matter is, I have no regrets for my involvement in the IRA. I have no regrets for anything I've done in my life. That's where I come from.
Yes. Thank you very much. Now you each are going to have an extended period when you can fill it out. So
we started a week of nights. I can't remember now what day the 23rd fell on, whether it was the start of the week of nights or whether it was part way through or whatever, but night duty started at 10:15. We would have a parade, discuss the likely points of concern for the coming night, and then go out on patrol. My patrol sergeant, Hugh Dodds, accompanied me that night. He was the passenger in the powder car that I was driving. I heard a call over the radio. The voice I recognised as that of Ray Murphy, a colleague, who said that he was being chased by two armed men who were firing at him, and that he was in Westridge Road, and that was as much as we had. I switched the car on again, drove round as fast as I could to Westridge Road, turned into it, It was approximately 400 to 500 yards from where we were stopped anyway, so I was there very quickly. Little way down on the left-hand side, I could see a Panda car parked up, or stationary, with 2 men standing by it. I think one was standing in front of the car. The second man was standing to the right-hand side of the driver's side of the car and pointing in. I heard 2 reports, saw the flashes, and the 2 men then came running towards me. I put the car onto the pavement in an attempt to block them. And they obviously came running past on my right-hand side. So I got out of the car and chased after them. I don't know how far I'd run, but I can remember thinking, you know, I ought to get my stick out and use it. And I thought, you know, almost running in tandem with the same thought was, what the devil am I going to do with a stick of wood against this gun? And at that stage, the 2 men turned towards me. One of them crouched, fired 2 shots. And my left leg gave way. I was looking at them and I thought, oh, you missed me, you buggers. And then the second one caught me. And I went down. I thought I'd fallen forwards, but I couldn't be certain. Now, in the events, I know that I think I must have blacked out at some stage there, because when I came to, Sergeant Dodds was crouched over me. With his radio, calling for an ambulance. Sorry.
It's okay.
Said that an officer had been shot and he needed an ambulance urgently. I remember this pumping feeling down in my groin area, feeling wet and sticky, just hoping I hadn't disgraced myself. And obviously that was blood. I know I lost a lot of blood.
What were you feeling at this stage? Did you think this were your last moments, or what was going through you?
I don't think so. I think I was thinking of my kids. In fact, this was going to spoil Christmas for them. I had no way of getting back to them and letting them know that I was all right. Oh dear, sorry.
It's okay.
Take your time. Don't worry.
I don't think I thought that it was going to be my last. No, I don't remember thinking that at any stage. I know that in fact I was told later that had it not been for the fact that I was in the city and within very close approximation to the ambulance station, that I probably wouldn't have made it alive as far as the hospital.
You did an incredibly brave thing by running after somebody who was armed when you were not armed yourself.
It was stupid.
Yeah.
It was stupid.
How did you feel towards the man who had attempted your life, to take your life?
On my personal attack, I tended to think that he was doing something he believed in. I was doing something I believed in. But what I couldn't come to terms with was, first of all, firing at somebody he knew, almost without doubt, to be an unarmed officer who was trying to get away, and then firing at another unarmed officer sitting in a car with no possibility of escape because he was guarding the one escape route, and just firing into the gun, or point blank range, firing at his head. And I was really incensed about that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you very much. Ronnie?
I joined the IRA when I was 16 years of age, and unlike Malcolm, I never got a pension, never got wages, I didn't get housing. It was a voluntary thing to join the IRA. And joining the IRA, at that time, it was an emotional response to what was happening in our community. I think for people to understand the conflict in Ireland, they have to understand some of the reasons why the conflict developed and how it developed. I think when you come from a nationalist community, for a number of years, there was discrimination, sectarianism, something like apartheid in South Africa. Nationalist people never felt part of the state. They felt alienated by the state. So we had to assert the right of Irish people to achieve our independence through the use of violence. You know, so in joining the IRA, it's not a career. You know for a fact, there's two things that's going to happen to you. You're either going to end up in a grave, or you're going to end up in a prison cell. So what happened anyway? In September 1972, I was with a North volunteer, a volunteer called Patricia Mackay, and she was carrying a weapon for me. And she was walking down Freer Street, and the British Army shot her dead. She wasn't told to halt. She wasn't apprehended. They shot the wee girl about 10 times. She was 20 years of age. It affected me, you know what I mean? The hatred, whatever way you want to put it, towards the British state was there, reinforced and redetermined that the only way to resolve a situation was through the use of armed struggle. So,
Can you take us to leading up to coming to England and your reasons for coming there? Yeah?
No problem.
What were you expecting to do in England?
Anything that was needed.
Which could have been?
Could have been bombings, could have been shootings, could have been assassinations, could have been anything. Anything that was needed to bring the war home. Because our philosophy at that time was one bomb in England was worth 1,000 bombs in Belfast. So I felt the need to bring the war to England in such a way.
What was your role specifically there, Ronnie?
What do you mean, what was my role?
What were you assigned to do in Southampton?
In Southampton?
Yeah.
Right, I'll tell you what happened then, right? I went to London and met up with a group called the Balcombe Street Unit. And it was decided, it was only a few of us, it was decided, after a while in London, that we would try and spread the campaign out throughout England to give the British authorities the opinion that there was more volunteers at work. rather than just a small group of volunteers. So we were based in Southampton, right? And the whole thing is, like, our orders were not to mix with the Irish community at all. Like, you know, we had to put ourselves in bed sits, keep ourselves to ourselves, go out, pick out targets, military targets if possible, and do them, like, you know, either blow them up or shoot them or what have you. And that's actually what happened. So me and this other guy were in the flat where Malcolm came to, or not, well, your friend first, like, you know what I mean? And what happened that there day, right? The gas bottle had run out. This is funny, like, you know, this is what happened, like, you know. But the gas bottle had run out. And the guy who had rented out the flat in West Ridge Road had went to the landlord and asked the landlord to replace the gas bottle. So the landlord came to the flat during the day and said, "Who are you?" And I says, "Well, I'm the sister, I'm the girl's brother. I'm just off a ship, and I'm here to look after the bedsit over the Christmas while my sister's away." Well, he objected to it. I says, "All right, if you have any objections, we'll head off," like, you know. Well, we had nowhere else to go, to be quite honest. So we went back to the flat that night, about 10 or half 10, something like that there, around about that there time. And the landlord had been waiting down the street. And unknown to us, he went for the police then, and the police came. One policeman came with the landlord, right? And he came in, right, and said, "Bump, bump, who are you?" and what have you. I always had a false name, George McPherson or something like that there. Well, I was trying to speak with an English accent, which, as you know, is practically impossible, like, you know. But that was part of the thing anyway. The policeman who was at the door said, "Could you hold on a minute?" So he went out and phoned for reinforcements outside the door before he came back in again. So he came back in again, proceeded to a charade, you know, when he asked me to spell my name. And I pronounced E, and he thought it was A. And I looked at him, and he looked at me, and I knew the game was up. You just know, you have an instinct. So what happened, the other guy was with me, we had 2 weapons underneath the mattress. At all times in England, you were armed. And I looked at him, and he went, and he got the weapon. But he let the policeman run out of the flat. He didn't want to shoot him, you know, which is fair play, like, you know. And I went and got the weapon. The other weapon was. And first of all, like, the landlord was standing at the door, and I pushed the weapon right into his stomach. I was going to shoot him, you know. And I looked in his eyes, and it was fear. And I refused to shoot him. I just...
Why?
Just refused to shoot him, like, you know, I didn't want to. But my reaction was, "You've brought this here on, I should shoot you." But I didn't. I run out the door, and I fired after the policeman, fired over his head, to be honest with you, like, you know, the bullet was found on a roof somewhere. You know, it was just to scare him, to let him know that we were armed. And then we proceeded to run. And I have a wee bit of a different recollection from the incident as Malcolm does. You know, we actually didn't fire into the car from close range, right? We fired at the car as it was coming, while the car was moving. So what actually happened, right? I remember a policeman jumping out of the car and running after us. I remember him getting shot.
Did you see him go down?
Oh, I seen him going down, huh?
And what?
You're getting away, you know. Unfortunate, like, you know. If Malcolm hadn't run after us, he wouldn't have got shot. Well, that's the way I look at it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it wasn't our intentions to shoot anybody that night. Our intentions was to get away. But the unfortunate fact was, if Malcolm had apprehended one of us, then we were caught. So if somebody's brave enough to run after you, they have to be brave enough to take the consequences. So that was the whole sequence of events. So we stayed in the graveyard. We got to a house. And when we got to this here house, we were looked after. That was another guy. He got 18 months for harbouring us as well. So after that there, we travelled to another location in England. And shortly after that there, we returned to Ireland. When I was in Ireland, I was working as a painter and decorator. Good painter and decorator as well.
But what about your continuation with the IRA?
Well, my continuation with the IRA at that time was very loose, to be quite honest with you. You know, when I came back from England, I just wanted to get on with my life.
Well, you were on the run, though.
I was on the run, but I wanted to get on with my life. I was living in the Free State in Dundalk. I was working in Dundalk. I was supposed to get married a couple of weeks after. I was arrested. And what happened, I was asked to go to Castledarg to actually do a bit of painting. And I went to Castledurg and done up in a painting. And I was going through a road check. I was stopped by the police again. And they asked me my name, I gave him my name. He didn't agree with me. But I was painting outside the pub, so I just come on down to the pub and the guy will confirm that my name's Joe O'Donnell. So the next thing was, went into the pub and I said to the bar owner, will you tell him I'm Joe O'Donnell, like, you know? And the bar owner refused to do that. So they brought me up to the station, which was in Castledurg. And when I walked in, I was recognised. So the next morning, police from Southampton came over and charged me with 3 attempted murders. So that's what happened anyway, and I got the 3 life sentences, 20 years and 2 14 years.
Well, here's Malcolm today, looking back and now looking at him right here in front of you. What goes through your mind after hearing his story and looking at him?
Well, I think first of all he's a very courageous guy, like, you know. I also believe, like, you know, that he is here to try and understand. Well, I hope he's here to try and understand. And I hope he understands, like, you know, the fact that he was shot was nothing personal. I was involved in a conflict. And that's it, like, you know. And I hope his life's done well, like, you know. I don't feel any...
And when you have heard how that affected their family and the pain that he's been through, does it cause you to have any regrets of pain that the family's been through?
No. No. The thing is, if you're involved in an army, if you're involved in a conflict, you have to accept the consequences of your actions. And accepting the consequences of your action, you cannot divorce yourself from the fact that people will be injured or killed.
Let me take it to another place then. You were a member of the IRA.
I was, yeah.
And you felt that you had a duty and you justified using violence to achieve the goals of your organization. And I sit here and I look at you and I see a real human being here. And I just can't imagine that when you look at Malcolm and see his daughter sitting there, that you also, from that level of a human being, not the soldier, not the person who was fighting for a cause, but as a human being, I would be surprised if you didn't have feelings for what you heard Malcolm.
Of course I have feelings.
So
like,
tell us about that. That's what we'd like to hear.
We don't want tears here. On the,
no, I would just...
or something like that. Like,
no, just tell us about when you just said you had feelings. That,
of course.
That would be really helpful.
Well, I'm saying, like, you know what I mean, anybody, Malcolm, or any person who's been injured in this conflict, like, you know, I have feelings for every person. Not just Malcolm, but for all the people who have been affected by this here conflict. And in saying I have feelings, I have genuine feelings. You know, I have genuine feelings for any person who has suffered as a result of this conflict. And I would say now, like, you know, I'm of the opinion, right, that violence is a useless way of achieving, although at times the struggle, it has been necessary. And that's my... I feel for any person who has been affected in this here conflict, Malcolm especially, like, you know.
Malcolm, you have heard Ronnie give his account. How has that struck you? What has that done for you as you look at this man who nearly killed you?
It's made me realise just what sort of background he was brought up on. And I can't say that had I been brought up under similar circumstances, I wouldn't have felt much the same way. I like to think that had any of my relatives been killed or injured or hurt in some way that was attributable to somebody else, yeah, I would have been angry, and I'd like to think that I would have been able to do something about it. How I went about that is another matter. I know that I see some things and I get so incensed about them, and I feel really violent towards the perpetrators, and yeah, I feel I could kill. I make no bones about that. And I'm absolutely certain that you and some of your colleagues must have felt exactly the same way. I've never had anyone killed alongside me. What I would have been prepared to do about it, I just don't know at this stage.
I think when you're talking about being prepared to do something, that's very good, like, you know, very well, like, you know, you accept the fact, like, you know, that there's different ways that people are going to react to different situations. But if you're in a situation whereby there is no other road to take, you know, if there's no political road to take, if there's no access to the politics, like, you know, then there's going to be a vacuum. And in that vacuum, like, you know, violence will erupt.
Do you feel that, had you been the age you are at the time this blew up, you would actually have taken the course that you did?
That would be difficult to answer, Malcolm. Like, you know, like everybody says, you're always wise over hindsight. You know, and I do regret the fact, like, you know, an armed conflict was necessary. I do not regret the fact that I was involved in the IRA, and I'll have to be honest about that. As a matter of fact, I'm very proud of it. But
how do you feel about the time you spent in prison? Do you feel it was wasted, or?
Well, do I feel it was wasted? Of course I feel it was wasted, like, you know. But the fact of the matter was, like, you know, I never regarded myself as a criminal. I was a political prisoner. I believed in what I was doing. I had the support of my community. I had the support of the people. You know, so I felt what I was doing, although I had lost my 21 years, and I was actually doing something to help our people achieve the things that we had to achieve through the use of violence. So that's the way I would put my experience in prison. I'm not a bitter person, Malcolm. You know, I don't look back and say, he did this or he did that, or I don't believe in it. Like, you know, I see things as they are. And don't get me wrong, I got some bad beatings in jail, you know, and some bad treatment. But the fact of the matter is, like, you know, I'd meet that person tomorrow, you know, as you're meeting me, and I would see the person as a person, you know, and I would try and understand the reason why, you know, and that would be it, like, you know.
You've no children?
No children.
Do you have any plans to have any?
Well, I hope so. I don't know. Might be still firing blanks.
What I'm really leading up to is the fact that to have been in this situation and to realise that my youngest child wouldn't even exist if I died that night. And I think what a tremendous loss that would be. I've got 3 amazing kids and I love them to bits. I feel very awkward about having put them through this situation. I said that I believed it was a stupid thing to do, and I've always held that opinion. Whether I do it again under the same circumstances, I'd like to think I would. If I was trying to prevent something I believed was wrong, but obviously as we get older we tend to see the pitfalls rather than the advantages.
That's right.
And well, I don't leave it there. I just think, you know, I would like to think that I would be able to do it again if the need arose.
And to be honest with you, I would have expected you to. You know what I mean? Like, I know what you were doing that day was your job. You know, you weren't there to harass me or anything like that. You were doing a job. The landlord called the policeman. The policeman came, was trying to do his job. Unfortunately, the things happened the way they happened. But I'm glad that you had the other child, and I'm glad you lived. And I'm glad you have 3 beautiful children. So,
yeah. I hope you have as many at least.
I hope so. See what happens. Yeah.
Perhaps I should ask you, Malcolm, what would you maybe want to hear, if there is anything you would want to hear from him that would facilitate and encourage your participation in helping people to understand this situation that gave rise to people taking up arms?
I would expect a certain amount of remorse for the damage that it has caused to individuals, to their families. As I said, I don't, in my instance, expect anything more than has already been given. I think we're both in agreement about that.
And
well, all I know is, like, you know, by doing this today, by both of us doing this today, we can actually create a situation where people can say, hey, hang on a minute, there's a guy shot him, there's a guy got shot, but they're having a talk here. And I am very hopeful for the future. I'm very hopeful that sometime you'll come over and have a pint, and maybe we could sit somewhere and have a pint and have a bit of a yarn, see where the crack is, see where you're going, see what you're doing, how you're developing, what you're working on, things that are of relevant importance to people who are trying to get on with their lives. That's the way I would see it.
Malcolm, do you think it was courageous of Ronnie today?
Yeah. Yes, I do. To come here today and say I was that man who was holding the gun that shot you. And expect not to be floored. Yeah. I've got a great deal of respect for you.
Thanks very much.
No problem.
It's a beautiful thing. I mean, this engagement that has occurred. How do you want to leave here? I mean, do you want to maybe shake hands?
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Well, gentlemen and young lady, that's a very simple gesture, but its significance and impact are more than we can compute. And the fact that both of you have come and that you have engaged, and as you say, I mean, you have not thrown missiles at each other, that you have spoken as human beings, and you keep wondering, why are we so stupid for so long? I mean, when are we going to learn that actually violence doesn't get us there? And we have ultimately got to sit down. We are very deeply humbled by yourselves. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And God bless you.
Tomorrow on Facing the Truth.
My son was lying on this dirty ground and somebody had killed him.
Can I perhaps ask how you have felt towards the men who killed your husband?
I wanted them dead.
I set myself up as judge, jury and executioner, and I took that young man's life.
If you've been affected by any of the issues in tonight's programme and would like to talk to someone in confidence for further information and support, please call the BBC Action Line on 08000 565 450. That's 08000 565 450. Lines may be busy, so please remember the Action Line is open 7 days a week from 7:30 in the morning until midnight, and all calls are free and confidential.